twice last week or so, but I haven't been in much because I had this stupid thing going on with the kettle back home and being in the press and all this kind of stuff. So I've deliberately not done. I had loads of requests for interviews with Sky News and BBC and all this kind of stuff, and I deliberately didn't do them. So I look like a complete dick, basically, which I'm sure is kind of how it would turn out. My wife said to me, "Whatever you do, don't go on and do interviews because you look like, you know, I was like the family buried under the patio when I interviewed." So and also because I wanted the PR to come through here, you know, because there's lots of good stuff here. I was conscious that Richard invited me in to do some stuff here and so on. So I wanted, given that you're doing a lot of things around IoT and all this kind of business, I wanted to kind of make sure that any kind of PR and any kind of interviews were done through here to kind of benefit everybody, not just kind of, you know, my crazy kind of kettle situation. So let me introduce myself first of all, and it's very informal. Just ask questions, shout stuff out. Apart from Morgan, he can't shout things out. So he'll just shout, and Moen's kind of shouting out. So a friend of mine from a friend of mine called Moen's is here from Denmark. Who's even kind of crazier than I am, sort of thing. So he's over there, and he will probably ask stupid things as well. But just to introduce myself first of all, so I actually live down over in Hove. I used to live along by kind of Seven Dials and so on before. So I've been in Brighton for maybe 35 years now or something. So I went to Long Hill years ago, Basvic, and I went to Brighton what was Brighton Poly then, you know, Long by Moulscombe and all that. So I've been here for kind of many years, but in the last kind of, I suppose, 15, 20 years, we're doing a lot of IT work. I formed a company which was based, well, it still is based down in Brighton. It's down by Black Lion Street, so called Ripon Mead. So I formed it with the other guy. Morgan, at one point, actually, up to recently, was the managing director there. You know, a few of us decided, for separate reasons and so on, to kind of move on. That was, I had about 120 people in there, not in the same building. It wasn't like a sort of sweatshop sort of thing. It was making landmines or whatever, you know. It was we had a kind of an office in India, office in the States, all this kind of stuff. But I've sort of since left there, playing around with a few new ideas and so on, and so forth. So my kind of technical background is I do a lot of work around what was originally kind of business intelligence and now things like big data and so on. IoT, a little bit of that as well. Not so much from the building things side, which is probably more your side, but more the kind of data these things provided and so on, really. Okay. I've read a couple of books as well that are there. I do, I might be here, show you here actually. So I do a personal blog now on kind of Medium. I used to have, well, the company that I had was really formed around a blog that I started writing about 15 years ago. It kind of, you know, we speak at events and conferences, it brought along kind of people to work for us who also kind of wrote and spoke and so on. So since I left, I started my own personal blog, which is kind of running on there. I also do a podcast on iTunes as well. So it's about 5 episodes now I've been doing. It's about 370 subscribers now or something. It's again around big data and so on. So I interview people I know in the industry and talk about kind of, you know, future of analytics and so on. And I also just started a meetup in London. So this is a kind of big data for kind of enterprise customers. So I also wouldn't mind getting involved in the meetups down here as well. So, you know, that's kind of an interesting area for me. And I also do stuff on Twitter as well, which is, I had 2 instructions from my wife when she went away last week. She said, make sure the house is tidy when I get back, and don't post anything stupid on Twitter. Okay, so that was my kind of instructions I was given last week. So I did stuff on Twitter. Sorry? And the house is a state as well, yeah, because of the reason I'm going to tell you in a moment, yeah. So when you work at home, it's yeah, you kind of you're kind of on the hook to make sure the place is tidy during the day, you know. But all you end up doing is you do it badly, and then you end up running around at kind of like 5 to 5, trying to tidy everything up, and then so on really. So I post stuff on Twitter, and then last week, so I think it was about Tuesday, I woke up, and I've got this kind of I've got a kettle, a Wi-Fi it's got by smarter devices. It's got a Wi-Fi kettle, and you can control it from your phone. Okay, so you've got a smartphone app for it, but that's not much point to that really, because you just kind of get your phone out and you just kind of press the button and all this kind of business. And so I've got it set up at home so that when you, I've linked it into kind of things like smart HomeKit and stuff like that, and smart things. So the idea is that you kind of wake up, this jawbone up kind of a device here, it registers you've got it out of sleep mode, it then turns the heating on, puts the lights on downstairs and bulbs the kettle. Okay, so that's the kind of thinking with it really. But in the morning I realised it wasn't responding to so I tried to use it using so go into here, go and press on this and say turn the kettle on. Hang on. So you go here, you turn the kettle on, and it should boil the kettle. It wasn't working. Okay.
He actually did that while he was doing a presentation in Denmark.
He did. It worked.
And I was just wondering what his wife was thinking.
So it wasn't working. So I thought, let's go and fix it. And it kind of, I realised that this kind of jerry-rigged kind of integration that I had done, it basically, because the kettle had disconnected from the network, I had to reconnect it. It then picked up a new IP address. I then couldn't find the device on the network because you can't go into it and find out what the IP address is. So I kind of used the IP scanner, trying to find doing a port scan on the network, trying to find the kettle. And as you do, I just posted on, because the UI from the kettle is kind of funny. You know, it kind of says, you can't go any further until you connect to the kettle network, and all these kind of like totally bizarre kind of instructions you have to kind of do. And I posted it on Twitter, and I kind of, you sort of realise during the day that the number of kind of retweets is going up, and I think this is interesting, and so by about sort of 3 o'clock, I managed to find the IP address, okay, in the end. So I've gone through all the DHCP logs and all this kind of stuff, trying to find it. I managed to finally get it to respond to voice control, but I thought then, well, what about this new Amazon Echo I've got? What if I can get that to work with it as well? So it's one of those things where I've got a million things to do which are much, much more important than doing this, like writing proposals and all this kind of stuff. But I kind of got into this thing about the kettle. And so kids come home from school, and I'm still upstairs trying to get this kettle working. So I got dressed in the morning, I was still like t-shirt and shorts and this kind of stuff. And then gets to about the evening, my wife comes home from away, and nothing's been done, and I'm still with this stupid kettle. And then by the end of the day, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I got it working. So you could just hear, she was in bed at 11 o'clock, and all you can hear is the echo going, sort of, I've now got, you hear the kettle starting up and all this kind of stuff. So I went down there, and I videoed it, and I posted it on Twitter. But then I realised it was actually become a Twitter moment. So you go to Twitter, and it turned into a moment. I thought, this is kind of interesting, because when it's been made into a series of kind of things there, and it just was taking off. And then so finally, this might be, if there's sound on this, let's have a look here. Is there going to be sound? I don't know. Anyway, so finally, in the end, at 1 o'clock, I got it to work. So if you then go downstairs, Amazon Echo, press, say, Alexa, turn on the kettle. It turned on the kettle. Okay, and I posted it, and that was it. And then, so I went to bed, and then the next morning, someone said to me, well done, you're in The Guardian. The Guardian's my favourite newspaper, so I was quite pleased. I read The Guardian. I tend not to agree with all the John Norton stuff. I'm more of a kind of digital optimist, I suppose, really, So that was on The Guardian, and I thought this is kind of interesting. And actually, funny enough, I scraped all the comments from the Guardian article to put into a kind of text analytics thing. And my son was reading them out to me on the way to Boys Brigade in the evening. And largely it was about getting off my fat arse and going and actually enjoying myself. So for some people, this was the kind of the greatest example of everything they hate about about geeks, about kind of whatever and all this kind of stuff. So I downloaded all that. But anyway, so then I realised it was actually the #1 trending story on The Guardian, above Brexit and above kind of Obama, this kind of stuff. And above Britain leaving the EU customs union, which is either it means so and then the phone just started ringing. The phone was ringing downstairs and all that because I stupidly put my address on one of the things on there, and then it ended up being on BuzzFeed. Okay, now I quite like BuzzFeed. Now, if we watch it every day, I never wanted to be a story on BuzzFeed. So it's on kind of BuzzFeed and all this, and I started kind of, it is slightly kind of egging, it wasn't 12 hours to get to Bod, it was 12 hours to integrate it with Amazon Echo, But then it ended up, and so I was talking to a friend, we've got a private Slack channel we use for my mates to kind of arrange going out and cycling and so on. So on the Slack channel, they were all commenting on this, and I said, well, they said, what does your wife Janet think? And I said, well, she's all right, as long as she doesn't work out. But actually, there's a video of our kitchen on the internet because it's a bit embarrassing. But then it was on the Standard, and then it got a bit international. So there's all stuff like this is Dutch and all that. I think it's Dutch on there. I don't know if it's Dutch anywhere, or Austrian or whatever, German or whatever. Then it was in German, and then it was over here, Australia. We got as far as Australia, okay. And then finally, some poor sod spent 11 hours setting up his Wi-Fi account and all that. And so this all went on there. So it's kind of an interesting story. It's interesting if it wasn't happening to you. Okay? If it was to your mates it was happening to, it'd be kind of funny. And then we got next day it was in the printed paper as well. So it was in the kind of Times there and all this. And so there's all this stuff that's kind of going on. And so I was quite conscious that my thing I do is not boiling kettles with good Wi-Fi. There's a story behind it really, and I kind of wanted to kind of in a way explain a little bit why I was doing it and what was the context of all this, because it's kind of a funny story, but it's I don't just sit at home trying to boil kettles using Wi-Fi and all that. And nobody in their right mind would spend 11 hours trying to boil a kettle by Wi-Fi and all this kind of stuff. But why was I doing this? So why was I doing it? Well, that's a question that the Daily Mail asked as well. The tone of the articles and the comments got a bit darker at this point, really. So the Mail Online, who've been trying to contact me as well for an interview, so it got a bit dark at this point, really, with the Mail and the Sun and all this kind of stuff. But it's interesting, so the Mail Online there, which for Murray's benefit is kind of, it's a daily hate sort of thing. It's the kind of anyway, so there's the Mail there. So what is it? It was data. And the reason that I have this kind of stupid setup at home, and actually the kettle is just the start of it really. The reason I have this kind of stats kettle at home is really, to do with data. So what I've been doing, my background, as I said, is in business intelligence, analytics, big data, and so on. And I kind of had the kettle is just the tip of the iceberg of the kind of crazy stuff I've got going on at home, really. So I was supposed to get burgled next day actually with the kind of stuff that I mentioned I was at home. So at home I've got this kind of crazy setup of a whole load of IoT devices. Now these are consumer IoT devices. So I think you guys that build things from scratch. So the stuff I've got at home is so I've got the Smart Things Hub, okay, and I'll explain why I use that in a moment. I've got used a thing called HomeBridge. So HomeBridge is a kind of open source implementation of the HomeKit protocol. So I can link stuff to HomeKit that isn't kind of Apple certified. The HomeKit stuff all goes through. So generally, I bring all the stuff through SmartThings so that I can then take the logs from that, so all the events, and I then transmit that across from HomeKit. The Samsung's thing is up in the cloud, and then what I use is what's called a Smart App to then feed all the event data through to something called Logstash that goes into a Hadoop cluster I'm running at home. Because say the kettle is only the start of it. In the garage at home, I've got like a 6-node Hadoop cluster running in there that I then use to do kind of like machine learning and all that kind of stuff. As a way that I can kind of, I suppose, my old job in my old company was CTO, so I was the kind of chief technologist. My job was to come up with the kind of all the crazy stuff that we then took out to customers, so that we could have a story to talk about and capabilities around these kind of things. Basically, there's a rack of servers in the garage running Hadoop and all this kind of business, and I use that with things like Spark and R and so on to do kind of analytics on this data. Okay. And also, as I'll talk about later on, I use IFTTT and the Maker channel, bringing stuff that's kind of non-numbers as well. Okay. And the other thing really, and this is where the kettle thing really comes in, was it was all about actually, and the reason the kettle took so long to sort out was not to connect it to the network. I mean, that took a little while to do, but the reason that it took so long was it's so hard to connect that kettle to these kind of like, wider ecosystems, like say HomeKit and all that kind of stuff, right? So that was where the time that's where the time went. So basically, what's possible when you join the things together? So let's put this again back in context, okay? So 6 months ago, or probably back in February this year, it's about 6 months ago, or not 8 months ago now, I went on a sabbatical from my old company. So I was exiting from my old company, and so as part of that, I got some time off to go and do some kind of research into kind of like, you know, where all this stuff is going. So I wanted to look at some things around next generation kind of analytics in the cloud and all this kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but whenever you kind of give yourself time off to do that, and there's no kind of particular purpose to it, you just end up going around in circles. You know, you don't really achieve anything. And so I had all this kind of time to go and look at things like, you know, Spark and Mesos and all this kind of clever stuff that's out there, but I had no purpose to it. But also what I did was I was trying to kind of lose some weight. And so what I did was I took up cycling. So I was doing a lot of cycling. So you obviously know the area here. I would typically go from I live over in New Church Road now in Hove. So I'd cycle from New Church Road along the seafront, along past the pier, along to Saltby and back every day. It's like 26 kilometres. I do that, and I've got this thing called a Yahoo, not Yahoo. It's called a Wahoo Element. This is a bike computer, which is one of those new generation of kind of cycling kind of computers that is very kind of almost like Apple-like, almost like kind of iPhone-like, in that it's very easy to kind of work with and program, and you can bring the data out and so on. So the telemetry from that, you can see I'm getting back into my old ways here. The telemetry from that and all the data and all the metrics would come from that. It would get synced up by Strava, and then Strava would then sort of write, you know, it would get kind of written to Strava's kind of, you know, cloud and so on, and then use this thing called Velo Viewer, which goes and lets me get all the data out there, bring it back in, and so I get all the data from the cycling stuff there, and start to bring this in. Okay, so that kind of got me interested. So now I've got a purpose for what I'm doing. So I'm trying to keep some weight off. I've got a kind of like a data source coming in, which is this cycling data, and I've got kind of, it's landing into my Hadoop cluster. I'm running kind of Cloudera Hadoop on there, you know, running things, well, I'll show you in a second actually, running stuff like Spark and Python machine learning and so on there. So I'm sort of doing all this, okay. And then I kind of got into this kind of, I got in with a kind of bad group. I got in with the quantified self group, okay. So quantified self, probably, as you've probably heard, it's a movement about people who want to use data to kind of, I suppose, improve their lives and all this kind of stuff, okay? And I joke about being that group, it's not, but it gets quite addictive because, you know, there's so many sources of data you can bring in on yourself, okay, that you can do this. So I've got one of these, there's a jawbone up 3 sort of health band, and so that records all kind of steps, and it records like how much sleep you get and all that. And so bringing all this kind of stuff in, and what I was trying to do was, at this point, answer a question that I was very kind of interested in, which was, if I'm trying to lose weight or gain or kind of maintain a kind of a weight, week on week, what is the thing, what is the action, what is the biggest kind of determinant of whether that's successful or not, you know? So is it the amount of exercise that I do? Is it the amount of sleep that I do? Is it the amount of work that I do? Okay, so I can bring all this data in and kind of understand, for me personally, what is the most kind of like determinant, you know, factor, which is the most predictive kind of element of all these things here, then it will tell me, you know, in theory, kind of what I can do in the future to kind of keep this weight off, okay? My wife said to me at the start, it's how much sleep you get, okay? Which it turned out to be kind of partially true. but so I'm bringing this kind of stuff in. So that's kind of backdrop here, okay? And this expanded out to be lots of data sources and so on. So the next thing, this is where the kettle comes in, is my other kind of project at home. When you're at home on effectively full pay and nothing to do, okay, and you've got Amazon there, okay, then it gets quite interesting. One of the platform was home automation, okay. So I started to think, well, what would be interesting if I can make all my house kind of Wi-Fi controlled and all this. So I started off by I've got Hue lights in the house. So Philips Hue lights go into there. And I've got like Nest. First of all, I had Hive as my kind of my heating set up, but then I used Nest in the end because Nest seemed to be more at the time more kind of like accessible via APIs and all this kind of stuff. Okay, but then he went on to a lot more things. So in the end, I ended up going with smart things. So Samsung Smart Things was good because it works by sort of Zigbee and Z-Wave and all this kind of stuff. So I've got all in the house, I've got all these motion sensors everywhere in the house. So the idea is to find kind of hotspots. So in the house, you know, which of the rooms are being used and all that, you know, I can tell whether somebody's in or not, but also stuff like, you know, taking out kind of a more socially useful kind of application, one of the ideas is that, you know, if the pattern of, say it's my parents' house, my parents live in a sheltered accommodation along by St James's Street, and so they live in a kind of one of those anchor kind of like trust things, and I'm always worried about them because they're in their 80s now, and you know, and theoretically, if I can put a couple of sensors in there, so motion sensors and, you know, even something like a Wi-Fi kettle, if in the morning the movement hasn't happened, okay, or if they've not had a cup of tea in the morning, then something's up, okay. So actually, you know, there's a kind of purpose to this really as well. So all the motion sensors are there. We've got all stuff like door sensors and all this. So basically, everything that can have a sensor attached to it in the house has got a sensor attached to it. And I gradually bought it all from like sort of Curry's up the road and that kind of stuff. But the reason I went with Samsung Smart Things for this was because with Apple, with HomeKit, there's no real kind of central kind of source you can go to get the state of what they call accessories. So if you want to go and log whether a door has been opened or the heating or stuff like that, there's no place to go to really to get that. I mean, you could certainly write a Swift application, for example, you know, in Xcode. That's what I'm doing now. So I'm writing an application in Swift now that's going to go and look at the kind of house, and it will go and poll all the things, and it will write the stuff back to kind of a log file. But with Samsung Smart Things, all of this stuff can go in there, and then I've written what's called a smart app that goes and basically every time an event, so it kind of it registers an interest in all the objects in the house. And as each one kind of registers an event, those events go via HTTP GET calls. It's a JSON kind of document. They go to into here. They go to Logstash. So Logstash is part of the Elasticsearch kind of setup. So has anybody here used Logstash at all, or Elasticsearch at all? No. It's like a NoSQL database basically. So the Logstash here goes into there, goes into Elasticsearch. Okay, has anyone here used Hadoop at all? Yeah, so the Elasticsearch database has like what's called a Hive storage handler running over it, which means you can query an Elasticsearch database using SQL. Okay, you ever used SQL databases? Oh, yeah, okay, so we're getting there. So I'm just going to make sure I'm completely in the wrong kind of group here. You know? I mean, this is all kind of crazy stuff, but the point of all this is to log all the data. Okay, so what I've got now is going back to about kind of February. I've got a kind of event by event record of everything that's happened in my house. Okay, and again, my thinking with this was what if the right? So I know that if my house is so today I woke up today. You know, sometimes you wake up and you're just a little bit sleepy and you can't get yourself sorted out. You know, or things like the kids upstairs. My son never goes to bed on time. Okay, so I'm thinking, what if I do like A/B testing on him. Okay, so if I start to do, so what if I do this thing where we've got a few lights in his room. Okay, so what if I just dim the lights a little bit? Okay, so I can do like A/B testing. So I do like sort of a week of kind of making the lights go to 80%, right? Or turning his heating off. Okay, so if I turn his heating off, because he likes to go to bed a bit earlier. And so the idea is that by monitoring stuff, because by monitoring what time he goes to bed, because I can see what time the kind of motion has stopped, all that kind of, I think if I told him there's a motion sensor in his room, he wouldn't be that happy. But it's more monitoring when he goes to bed, not what he's up to when he gets in there. It's the point is that I'm trying to do almost like experimentation. You know, to use is the house environment. Is that something that is a contributor to how much exercise people do, how much sleep they get, and all that kind of stuff? So we're getting, for the house, we're getting these kind of bands, like we're getting these bands of people. The point is, we're trying to sort of see, for 4 different people in the house, my wife, daughter, son, whatever, does the house environment affect, does it mean that, does it have any effect on how much sleep you get and all that, or is it down to other factors and so on there? I mean, so the point is to use all this data to do interesting things with, really, okay? So this is all kind of coming in here. So in terms of kind of architecture, I'm the only person I know who's got kind of like a systems architecture for kind of for his house, you know. But this is the kind of setup I've got here. So this is, we've got here unstructured data coming in here. We've got kind of event data all coming in real time and batch and so on into what we call in Hadoop terms a kind of data reservoir. And I'm then running machine learning routines on it, things like stats and linear regression, all that kind of stuff. to try and work out some interesting things, okay, which is kind of slightly crazy to do in your house. But as I said, I've had a bit of time off really, and I thought I might as well try and use it in a productive way, rather than just going down the betting shop and putting money on the horse and all that kind of stuff. So, so if anyone's interested in terms of how the data comes in, so for data that comes in from, say, smartphone apps and things like my cycling computer and so on, I found that the best way of bringing this in a standardised way was to use IFTTT. Who's heard of that? Right. So if this, then this. So what I do is virtually all of the apps that I use, so Strava, Jawbone, email, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. They all have kind of like triggers. You can start from there. So what I do then is I run those through what's called the maker channel. So there's a maker channel, you probably know this within IFTTT, where you can say the payload, effectively the bit that is the if this then that part can be a maker channel call, and that can then call an arbitrary URL. So in my case, it's calling my kind of home network, and it's passing across as a JSON document all of the details of that event, right? So if it's an Instagram photograph being taken, it sends the URL of that, it sends the kind of the title, the location, all that kind of stuff. If it's an email that I'm receiving up there, it sends the email, body contents, all that kind of stuff through there. So basically, it's a total surveillance project on myself, really, okay? So I've got all things like Strava, all that stuff comes in. So this all comes in via if this then that, okay? And that then gets logged into JSON documents, which then end up in Hadoop, okay? And then for smart things, slightly different. What I do there is a smart app that's running. That is then linking into Logstash again as well. It's sending every event as a kind of like a HTTP kind of get, I think it is. All the data goes in there, and that goes into Hadoop as well. Okay, so I've now got sort of two main feeds of data coming in. One is the kind of the data from wearables and so on, and exercise and stuff like that, and one is the kind of house data. Okay. And then we get onto the machine learning part. So this really was the purpose of it for me, because I wanted to use stats and things like models and all that kind of stuff on the data to kind of find some stuff out that's kind of interesting. And the slides that are here, they're all on Speaker Deck. So what you can do, if you're interested in the detail, and I'm around here anyway, but the detail of how I do it, I mean, all this stuff is all working. It's actually running at home, and I'm doing this stuff now, and so on. So what I tend to sort of say now is if I look here, I started off my experimentation bit first of all by taking just the feed from the Jawbone up to extract. So what I did before I got all the kind of real-time stuff working, I just took a data set, which was the export file. You can go to the Jawbone website, you can download this export file, which in my case has weight readings, it has workout readings, it has all that kind of stuff. I link all my apps to that. And so, I did at the time look at Apple Health as well, but the problem with Apple Health is, like anything to do with Apple, there's no central kind of store of data. So what I've got in the end with Apple Health is an app on here that takes that data and writes it as JSON documents to Dropbox, for example. So I can get all the Apple Health stuff from there. But the easiest way to do it in this case was to get the Jawbone data, bring it in, and so on. And then what I do now, and this is where, when I talk about this thing at an Oracle event, I then talk about some Oracle software that I use to do this. Now, you don't have to use Oracle software. I use this because this is what I know. My company, my previous company's background is we were kind of largely a kind of Oracle partner. So we would use, in this case here, what's called Oracle Big Data Discovery to do the kind of analysis. To be honest, you could use, there's lots of tools you can use, or you could just use things like, Spark or Python or stuff like that, But I used a tool here to go in and do some, initial kind of like analysis here. One thing I found with the weight kind of work, so I was trying to work out which of all these factors had the biggest influence on weight change. There's no point looking at what your weight change is day on day. It could be you've got a big pair of pants on or something. It could be kind of anything. It could be that you had a kind of a steak last night or something. If you look at your weight day on day, then there's not much point in looking at that. But what I did was I used this tool to roll up the data, to aggregate it to the week level, and then your weight change week on week is fairly significant, really. So it goes down, goes up. I was talking to Murray's earlier on. He's been sort of like dieting as well, and so on. and it's kind of, you know, if your weight goes down by 5 kilos in a week, and again 5 kilos the next week, that actually means something, whereas it can go up or down by a couple of kilos seemingly day by day, really, depending on sort of like, you know, whether you've had a drink or not, and stuff like that. So I go in here, and then this tool, I mean, this is, you know, this tool is good at doing it, but it's not the only tool you can use. It's an example of a tool to go in and basically, you know, look at all this data here. I can then go in, and one of the challenges with any kind of work you do with these health devices is you don't typically weigh yourself every day. So mine's, you've got a new set of scales like I've got. You go in there and you sit on it, you stand on it, you get away, but you don't weigh yourself every day typically. Okay. So but you typically need to have, for every kind of row of data in these kind of analysis, there has to be a recording, a measurement for each of the factors in there. So if you've not weighed yourself, so if Maureen's, you know, myself, we weigh ourselves today and then 2 days later, on the day in between, if there's no weight reading, then what do you do? So it's probably fair to say, well, let's take the kind of the average of those two, or the average over the week, and say that's what that figure is. Okay. So you can fill in those gaps by making an intelligent guess to say, well, you know, your weight, you wouldn't suddenly have gone down to 0 kind of kilograms, so it's going to be something between those two there probably. Okay. But if you look at, say, workout data, if I go cycling today and then cycling on sort of Friday, but there's no recording for Thursday, actually chances were I was in the pub or something, or it was raining or stuff like that. So actually in that case then it's not right to take the average. You should actually kind of like say it's 0 or not applicable or whatever. Okay. So how you fill in those missing things is, and I think anything to do with, say, health data, you get this a lot. People don't, you know, go and work out every day. They don't measure themselves every day and all that. So how you handle this is interesting, really. Okay. And also with things like event data. So if I look at, I've got, so the feed coming in from SmartThings gives me gives me the time that the light switch was turned on and the light switch was turned off and all that kind of stuff. And so am I really interested in that, or am I interested in maybe so what I do with this thing is I have almost like a table of 5-minute intervals over the day, and I then use this feed coming in to say, right, of these 5-minute slots, was the room occupied or not, was the light on, all that sort of thing. So how you store this and how you deal with this is kind of interesting, really. So anyway, went through all here, looked at stuff, and it's all to do with the tool here, really. There we go, so I do here. And I ended up then with, so I'll put it very, it's not clever really, but I'll put it on there. But the thing I did then was I then, so this tool, and most of them do something like this, I then shelled out from the tool to a command line environment, and I can start to use Python. Okay, so obviously most of you know what Python is, so I've used Python, but Python has a bunch of like statistical and graphical and machine learning libraries that I can then use to start to work on the data. So the first thing I did was I used, there's a library called Pandas. Okay, so Pandas is a kind of like basically a stats and graphical sort of library that I can use with Python to do a very simple thing. What was my weight change week? You know, what was my change in weight week on week? So if I'm trying to say I've got 50 factors, okay, how many emails I answered, how many photographs I took, what was the tone of my kind of Facebook updates and that sort of thing. What I'm trying to do is to work out which of those 50 things is the most predictive of this thing at the end, this one factor at the end. And I wasn't really asking it to predict what my weight was, because my weight at the end of the week isn't just a factor of all those things. I'm asking it to predict what was the change in weight over time. Okay, so you know it's not like 50 things I do leads to 85 kilograms. Okay, actually it's all the things I do leads to maybe 5 kilograms gained or 5 kilograms lost. Okay, so I'm looking for it to predict the end kind of like, you know, result, not the kind of final thing there. So I used Python and whatever to do all that. And then I did what's called a correlation matrix. So going into this and trying to say, of all those factors, which of all those, in this case here, there's about kind of, 15 different factors I've got in here. These are all those measurements, like kind of, you know, number of emails, number of photographs taken, you know, how much exercise I've done, and so on. And this would then go, and it would say by the strength by the colour of the red or the blue there, of which of these you know, factors has the most strong relationship with kind of weight gain and weight loss. Okay, and so by doing that, I was able to kind of narrow down the factors into the ones for me were most kind of, you know, were most predictive. And so going into here, and it worked out that the things that were the most predictive for me, the 5 factors were things like number of emails sent during the day, the number of calories in general that I kind of expended in energy during the day. Okay, so walking and measured by this kind of jawbone thing here. The sleep duration I had on the previous night, and so on then. Okay. And so then I found then that, and so I did things like scatter plots and so on using kind of like Python and so on there, and got to the point, and I did also like a linear regression, so I used a linear regression to work out these kind of things and so on there, and it got to the point where, for me it worked out that the most predictive kind of like activity or thing I did during the day that had an impact on my weight, over the week, was the number of emails I sent. Right? And the reason for that was, and actually the more emails I sent, the more weight I lost, which is kind of weird, isn't it? You know, it would seem counterintuitive. And actually, it's because I was going through the kind of the leaving a mile company, and I had loads of legal stuff to do all the time. So I was up till like 2 in the morning quite often, just going through kind of like new drafts and contracts and legal terms and all this kind of stuff. And it was quite, to be honest, it was quite stressful. It was quite kind of like caught up in stuff. And so the more I was doing that, the less sleep I was getting. The next day I'd be so wound up by the whole thing, I'd go massively cycling around Brighton. So if you saw some crazy bloke cycling around Brighton, you know, that sort of time. Yeah, mines, yeah.
So actually it's the number of lawyers in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's
lawyers makes you lose weight.
So actually, yeah, so it was stress. It was stress. Stress for me at the time was the thing that was causing me to do that. Now, obviously, over time, that's not a great policy. That's not a great strategy, kind of over life, because you end up kind of like, you know, dead at some point doing that. So over time, it's changed, and it was down to, unfortunately, boringly, how much sleep you get. Because the more sleep you get, the more likely you are to exercise the next day. If you don't, so I find if I don't get much sleep, okay, the next day you wake up and you're kind of all grouchy and all that kind of stuff. So not only do you not do any exercise, but you also tend to eat rubbish as well. So you kind of like eat biscuits and stuff and watch kind of like, you know, watch TV and all this kind of business. So for me, later on, I got to that really, okay. But for me, this is kind of very interesting because it kind of served several purposes. So first of all, it kept me out of mischief for kind of like for 6 months, you know. So it's something that kind of I found interesting to do and so on. But also this total kind of view of me, and with all the house data as well coming in and all that kind of business, was interesting, and it gave me an insight into my life that I didn't have before. I've noticed there's quite a few apps on the iPhone now that try to do a sort of a similar sort of thing, in that they give you a view. So I use something called Rescue Time as well, which is a kind of app that looks at what you've been on the internet and stuff and all that, which is kind of interesting. And it looks at what you've been doing in terms of applications and so on. So there's a kind of interest in doing this, but for me, it was going beyond just the basic things you can get from there and taking all the data, bringing the house data in as well, and starting to do things like, so there's A/B testing on the house and all that kind of stuff. You know, it was kind of a good thing. And so going beyond this, again, as part of my kind of technology, again, for most of you this is probably meaningless really, but looking at stuff like Spark and Kudu, and there's lots of kind of new technologies coming along in the kind of big data space. So what I do now is I've got this thing called StreamSets that I use. So StreamSets is a kind of a data loading tool that I can use for loading Hadoop kind of, you know, in a clever way and so on. I also have everything fed through now into real-time kind of tables in Hadoop. Use this thing called Kudu. So I can, you know, I can run dashboards over it. So this is another kind of Oracle product. This could be, you know, whatever. And so I go in there, and you know, the point is, it's a bit nerdy. I know that. You know.
Do you think so?
Do you think it might be? Yeah. I think it might be. You could make the argument that it is slightly kind of obsessive and nerdy and whatever, but it's kind of. But you know what? It's better than kind of sitting looking out the window all day, you know. And certainly, what the insights it's given me into stuff, all the IoT stuff, is interesting. The fact and the difficult. I mean, I think key insights out of this is how hard it is to actually bring the home IoT stuff together. So to get, you know, so I've got on all the kind of the radiators, I've got these individual kind of like thermostats. I can go in there and I can set the temperature on that. But they're running on HomeKit. They won't talk back to kind of like stuff. The Amazon Echo has been the kind of the additional thing that has really made it interesting. So, you know, we go in the morning, you go into the kitchen, you say, yeah, Alexa, what's the time? Alexa, what's my appointments? You go, Alexa, turn the kitchen lights down 50%, and all that, and it works. It's brilliant. And famously, Alexa, turn the kettle on, and it will kettle for you. You know, problem is then that there's no water in the kettle, so you have to kind of run over there quickly and kind of turn it off, put some water in it and all that. But it's kind of, you know, and I think that, I don't know, it's interesting really, you know, and yeah, so it was all about getting the data from my point of view and trying to link it all together. And it wasn't just about that stupid kettle, it was about kind of, you know, using it for, I suppose, more meaningful purposes really, like all this kind of stuff here. So, and this was me proving to myself that all the kind of the exercise was making a difference. So I went on this kind of crazy 3-day kind of like cycling tour around the south. I went up to, definitely we do cycling, but you know, you cycle up, there's the Downslink way, you can go from Shoreham up to kind of Guildford. I went up there, and then from there down to the South Downs way, and then from kind of Cocking to back to here. So, you know, and that led to that was where that massive spike in cycling happened in sort of July. But then the trend line there is not weight, hopefully. That's distance cycled. What is it? No, that can't be the weight. Can I? 50. That's something anyway. That's something. Hopefully that isn't weight, because that would be hilarious, wouldn't it? So no, it's workout month, trend, distance, temperature. Oh no, that shows my distance. Oh, anyway, so the distance going up anyway. So that was it. So I was anyway. So. But yeah, it does obviously have its kind of privacy concerns. Yeah, the fact that we've got this kind of total surveillance going on is interesting. So sort of the obligatory Dilbert cartoon there, you know, I can see you logging everything using your Fitbit, but whatever it is we're doing, stop doing it, you know. But it's, you know, it is interesting really, and I think commercial applications, certainly there's lots of apps I'm seeing on here doing this. I noticed also that with the interview, Richard, the interview that we did right on here, you notice the Guardian picked up on it, and there was the woman who did the original kind of story. She wrote an article a couple of days ago, which was almost exactly what we've been talking about. So it was about using home IoT stuff to help the kind of the vulnerable and that. And you know what? We're here to try and spread ideas, so I don't really care about that. And I'd rather that a good idea gets out and so on. But there are kind of like, you know, benefits. It's not just about money. It's about kind of helping people and all that kind of stuff. It helped me, got me into cycling again, all that kind of stuff. But so it's not all just about kettle. It's actually about kind of trying to use this stuff in a way that is useful for people as well, really. And that's the kind of story, really. You know. So who's got any of this stuff on it at home? Anybody use kind of, you know, home kit and stuff and smart things and stuff like that? Well, what are you guys doing? I mean, you know, you're doing kind of IoT stuff, aren't you? What kind of stuff are you doing?
Yeah, I've been using wearables for quite a while.
Yeah.
Not as far as you.
Not the same obsessive kind of like this that I've been doing it, no.
We are a consulting business that works primarily in digital health, so I'm really interested in it.
Yeah.
I'm not a data expert. We work more on the commercial side, and we consider ourselves quite front with wearable technologies.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting.
It is, and that's why when Morgan mentioned about kind of coming in here, I thought it'd be interesting to do that, because there aren't many people that you see doing this really, and it is interesting, you know. I mean, so I did down at to my son's at Hove Park School over in kind of Neville Road, and so last year this year actually, while I was on sabbatical, to keep myself busy during the kind of 6 months, I started the Raspberry Pi Club for them. So I went along there, we donated some kits. We had 10 kids there doing kind of like, you know, Raspberry Pi stuff. We've got like the sense hat ball that goes on it as well, and we did stuff like that. And so what we're hoping to do with them this year or next year now, if it's an idea I put to them, is there's this kind of crazy idea in Scotland about if kids do one mile of running each day, then they'll be kind of like, their minds are kind of more, and it's probably, and you know what, it's certainly true. But what I thought would be interesting would be to give, you know, say 10 kids these kind of devices, right, or cheaper ones or something, you know, and then set up some iBeacons around the school and all that kind of stuff. And also, you know, it logs when they come into school. It logs kind of, you know, what they're eating, you know, in the restaurant and so on. I thought it would be interesting to give a control group, say 5 kids, these things and make them do the runs. Okay, so 5 kids you don't like. So you know, I'm joking. So 5 kids make them do the runs every day. Okay, and then 5 kids don't do the runs every day. and then you measure whether or not it actually has any effect, because these kind of ideas, kids should run sort of a mile a day. A lot of it is anecdotal, a lot of it is kind of like just sort of, talking really. But I thought what would be interesting would be to get the kids who've got the Raspberry Pi Club thing get there to actually be taking the data in. So with the Raspberry Pi, you can obviously you can bring data into it and so on. But there's a Microsoft sort of like Windows embedded kind of thing you can buy for it and get for it as well, to run IoT stuff on there. And I thought it would be interesting to not only run an IoT project with the school, but get the kids to analyse the data afterwards as well, and get them into kind of using IoT and so on. And for me, the reason this stuff was interesting and worthwhile doing was because it's your own data and it's interesting. Typically when you try and get people interested in IoT, it's about kind of like, measuring the gas meters all around Britain and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. Well, it's commercially sensible, but it's not really kind of interesting for you personally. But when you do it with your own data and the kids down at school locally and all that, it makes it interesting, really.
I think Public Health England could do it.
Well, funny enough, I had dinner with the guy from Public Health England yesterday, actually. So I was in London at an event, that was an Oracle event actually, and I'm rattling on, as I usually do about all this kind of stuff to whoever will listen. And I said, well, because my wife works in Brighton Council, she works in public health there. So all things like they have healthy living pharmacy kind of events there, and all this kind of stuff going on. And I was rattling on about it. He said, you know what, I work for Public Health England, I collect all the data in, and so it's a small world, isn't it? And
the wearables manufacturers, they own the opportunity with the kids.
Yeah.
For example, Garmin just came out with a new wearable for
Yeah.
kids with a 6 months battery, so they know.
Yeah.
Every week or whatever. So.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of interest in the idea of using this stuff for good, really. For good reasons and so on. And you've got to think about the privacy concerns. You've got to think about all that kind of stuff. And it has to be all opt in and all the usual kind of stuff, really. But if we can help people to help themselves, I mean, for me, it meant that I kept some weight off it, got some exercise. The house now responds to voice controls, and although funny enough now, there's so many different rules going on with it. We can't work out how to turn the heating off. So it comes on. It comes on at night about 11 o'clock, right? And we have to kind of, oh God. And there's something somewhere is setting it off. And because I've got rules running within HomeKit, within kind of smart things, and within the Nest and within Amazon Echo, and something is kicking it off. So I'm able to now write something that sits over the top of it all and acts as a kind of like a supervisor to sort of say, right, the heat should be coming on at this time. So if it comes on, turn it off. So it's actually gone beyond, it's become sentient now. So, sorry, yeah.
I mean, I think, isn't that one of the great worries about the IoT? That
Yeah.
the architecture is flaky.
Oh, it is.
That kind of thing that you can't debug it, you can't see what the hell's going on.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. And so one of the most common and correct kind of objection that the Guardian comments had was, first of all, is it very flaky and all that? And yeah, absolutely. It becomes, I'd say, the standard of programming going on. So when I bring together my kind of kettle thing, I've got a public IP address and a URL you can call to boil my kettle. So if you found that out, you can just sit there and boil my kettle all day. Which I would, and I would if I found it out. I'd boil if I found out my mate's IP address and kettle thing, I'd be boiling it all day. For laugh. And so that is a valid point. And I'd say that there was a good article. I think it was John Norton or someone kind of said that you're not John Norton, are you? You look sort of weird, sort of thing, So, no, it was a valid point to say that security and all that is not a selling point for these things. So when you buy your Wi-Fi cable, when you buy your kind of stuff from China or whatever, you don't buy it because it's secure and all that. And so you've got that thing happen recently with the DDoS attacks. People were using kettles and stuff and lights to actually launch denial of service attacks on people as well. I think it was the guy. So. Yes, absolutely, it is, and I think that in the same way that when you sell a device now, that if you sell anything that connects to the kind of the electricity, it has to be kind of like a CE marked, isn't it, and so on. There should be something similar to say if this connects either directly or indirectly to the public internet, there should be some kind of like sort of a certification on there to say that it can't be used for all this kind of stuff, because you've got all this stuff being turned out and presumably by us or whatever, that is inherently kind of insecure and exploitable, really, and in the same way that electricity is a kind of public, thing, the internet is as well. So absolutely, yeah, it's in that day. We're in that stage now of people kind of building their own kind of electricity. I think where we are now is not a sustainable situation really, but I think we shouldn't not look at it, but we should certainly be aware of what are the implications of this and the security kind of concerns and so on. Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you monitored how many attacks you're getting since you became famous?
No, but I should do, shouldn't I? I mean, I've got
people able to switch your kettle on right now.
Well, they could do, yeah. Well, they could do, but even I can't switch it on. It's broken. The thing is, it's broken again now, so even I can't switch it on. So if they do, good luck to them, really, because they've obviously fixed the problem. I'm hoping someone will hack in and fix it for me. But yeah, it is. It is. Well, actually, I looked at my thing the other day and I realised it was set to 38 degrees. And I thought, I'm going to get out and they'll be dead because I've kind of set it. But I think that, yes, interestingly, I mean, I've got a network. When this all kicked off, because of all the logging of all the stuff happening from Twitter, I couldn't. The connection out was getting saturated. So absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's why I kind of lied low a little bit afterwards, because I didn't want to become some kind of comedy sort of like sort of victim of all this stuff going on. Because absolutely, you can probably guess the password on Periscope now, but probably can guess the password for my router fairly easily and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, absolutely, you've got to think about that really. And all they can do is bowl me out of the stuff and turn the heat up. It's not the end of the world. But actually, if they can get through to, I've got banks of servers at home, I've got kind of all that. Actually, it is. You wouldn't want that stuff to be compromised, really. Yeah, and it is very insecure. Not that insecure, should I say, for public consumption, but compared to say some places. And I think we're at that kind of frontier thing now of trying things out, but it's got to get more secure, really, as well.
Have you also banned your children from learning programming? Because when
No.
they start hacking you,
Although they do, I mean, I was trying to encourage them actually, because I think this is another theory I've got. That my son has got Minecraft. He's got a Minecraft server. He's got like a Minecraft YouTube account. He's got, he and all that kind of stuff. But he trying to get. So I brought home a Raspberry Pi for him to look at, and it was like something stamped on a calculator. I put it in an envelope. It's just a series of just things on there. And so for him, the problem with programming, I think, for kids is the problem with programming is that there's too many layers of abstraction now. If you say to kids, go and learn Python or whatever, then what would they? They want to be writing iPhone applications and all that. And the only reason that he got into Python was, I think, because of Minecraft and trying to get the server working and sort of trying to get some Java stuff working and so on. I wish in a way they would get more into it, but they're more into, in the same way that perhaps when we were growing up, we were interested in building kind of like, building microprocessors and all that kind of stuff. We were writing stuff in BASIC, we were writing stuff in kind of Pascal, we were doing all that kind of stuff. I think as the generations kind of get older, the level of abstraction they're working at is getting higher and higher. And so programming is it's hard to get them interested in that stuff sometimes. So I wish they would, although it's maybe I shouldn't be saying that really, because they're completely locking me out of stuff. So the next thing I want to try and do is one of those internet-connected locks at home, which should be interesting. Because the problem with that though is you just walk past the house and go, hey Siri, open the door, and it opens the door, which is kind of to anybody, which is obviously not good. But yeah, so there's all concerns around that as well. I mean, for me, actually, the whole thing for me was about getting a data source for doing some machine learning experiments. But then it sort of spiralled into completely automating the house and so on, and that became a subject in itself, really. So yeah. So that's what I've been getting up to anyway the last few weeks. So yeah. And also, I mean, I'm really keen to talk to you guys on that kind of stuff. I mean, it's any kind of meetups or anything at all. I mean, it's all interesting stuff. Cheers. Thanks.
thank you very much.